am a native Michigander. Grew up in Tecumseh on the east side. Um, Public schools grad, went to Michigan State, studied political science pre-law because I wanted to be a lawyer. It's a real full circle moment that I'm heading to Lansing in January because I did an internship for Lieutenant Governor Connie Binsfeld while completing my degree at Michigan State. So it's pretty funny that I'm heading back there for work. And I did go to Wayne State and practiced or graduated from there, practiced law in Michigan, but then my husband went active duty with the Navy. So we traveled for 11 years, both coasts, Okinawa, Japan, last stop in Great Lakes, north of Chicago. And then we landed here in Kalamazoo in 2010. Big part of my story is that I was diagnosed with breast cancer less than a year later at the age of 38. Which came as quite a shock, but as is sort of a cliche with cancer, it really does push you to do things that maybe are out of your comfort zone because we know our time here is short. So that's part of what pushed me to run for office. I initially ran for county commissioner in 2018, ran against a Republican who'd been a state rep, been a state senator, and had been sitting there for 2 terms. And I ran on transparency and accessible leadership, which is what I felt the residents of that county commission district deserved. I wanted someone who was willing to listen and hear, sides of an argument before making decisions and really reflect what the people wanted. And that resonated. I knocked 5,000 doors and we sent tons of mail and actually flipped that seat. So I've been serving as a county commissioner since January 2019. And when the opportunity arose to run for the 61st, I, again, that desire for a transparent, accessible leader who really reflects the people of the district, what it remained, that's what I want for myself and my family and my friends that, live in the district. And so went ahead and ran on the 3 key issues of education, protecting our water and environment, and healthcare. And those resonated from the beginning of the campaign all the way through COVID to the end. Obviously, other issues popped up as well. But I'm so excited to work on these things at the legislature.
Great, thank you so much. And all very important issues, definitely. So glad that you'll be here in Lansing for the 101st legislature. Now, Representative-Elect Puri, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Thank you for Clean Water Action and Tim and the Sierra Club for having us and all of your help throughout the cycle. I'm excited to be here with you and with Rep-Elect Morse. But these are issues that are very close to my heart, and I'm happy to have this forum here. But just a little bit about myself personally. I'm a father. I have 2 small boys, which really drove a lot of the reason I was running for office, just to fight for their future. I tell people I wanted to fight to make Michigan a place where we wanted to raise a family again. I'm married. My wife is a small business owner, and I'm the son of immigrants. And I bring that up because my parents came to this country nearly 50 years ago. And like a lot of immigrants of their time, they mortgaged everything they had to fight for a future and come to a place where they could provide more opportunities for their kids. And, those 2 lovebirds could have opened up a map and settled anywhere between San Diego and New York City. And they picked a small town in the Midwest. And years later, I'm very happy that we settled here. But unfortunately, a lot of the reasons that drove my parents to immigrate to this country are under assault. And it's, it's just the educational opportunities for my kids and all of Michigan kids are not equitable. Our public schools are not funded. And it's just not the values that drove my parents to come to this country. And unfortunately, the environment is also a big reason of that. And my parents came to this country from India, and back when they were growing up in the 60s, they would look at America as a place, kind of metaphorically, they would say that America is a place where you could turn on the water and drink the tap. You could open the tap and drink the water right out of it. And it's almost a paradox here to be living in Michigan, home to the fresh water supply of the world, and to question whether we can drink the water coming out of our tap at our home. And it's just didn't sit right with me. Ultimately, these values led me to work with President Barack Obama. And it was actually a personal conversation after the 2012 election in which he challenged me to be the representation that I wanted to see. And the words really hit home. I moved back to Michigan with my wife and got started and just started to see so many inequities across the state that really didn't sit right for me, which led me to want to elevate my voice, my platform to fight for all of Michiganders.
Great, thank you very much. And Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head, Rep-Elect Puri. You know, you would expect, you know, here in Michigan, we should be able to have access to clean, safe drinking water, no matter where we are in the state of Michigan, being surrounded by the world's largest freshwater supply. And so, you know, that really leads me into the next question, and we'll start with you this time, Rep-Elect Puri. What do you think are some of the major environmental issues facing us here in Michigan, as well as, you know, in your district as well?
Yeah, this is you know, important to break out. And for me, you know, broadly speaking, my district has its own complexity and nuance like every other district out there. But really the big issues here in this district are the same systemic issues that plague us all across Michigan, unfortunately. And so I guess if we were to break it out a little bit, you know, we have our water issues. Line 5 is a big issue here locally. It's been in the news recently. Just drinking water. We touched on that with our PFAS contaminations. Everyone knows that Michigan unfortunately leads the country on that list. And the toxic algal blooms. We have some lakes here that have been really affected by that. And so, and then on kind of just a public health standpoint, the lead poisoning is obviously top of mind. Healthy food access. We want to ensure that we're breathing clean air and drinking clean water. You know, and that obviously leads to energy and climate issues. We want to be promoting clean energy, moving to a greener and more sustainable grid. We want to be modernizing transportation. I'm coming from the automotive industry, so that's something I'm particularly passionate about, and just pushing back on fossil fuels. And last but not least, environmental justice, you know, ending the water shutoff problem, amongst many other things. And unfortunately, this isn't even an exhaustive list. There's no shortage of things that Rep. Morse and I are going to have to be taking on the next legislator. And I look forward to taking all these things on.
Absolutely. And Rep-Elect Morse.
Sure. Well, so, you know, Rep-Elect Puri obviously hit on many of the things, but I think one of the key things that we should be talking about, not just as a state, but as a nation, is infrastructure. You know, we have a lot of issues that we are going to need to resolve. We need to put people back to work post-COVID. We need to make sure our water supply is safe, whether we're talking about lead lines, PFAS, which we've had 2, you know, instances of PFAS contamination here in Kalamazoo County alone. You know, there are a lot of things that we could do, which would not only make us all safer, but would put people to work. So I think when we have, you know, dual reasons, like, we should move forward. Obviously, money is always a challenge, but again, if we need to prioritize some things in our state. The thing about my district is not only the PFAS as mentioned, but we've had flooding here. In my county commission district, actually, there's 2 lakes that have been flooded for 3 years. And not just the lakes, but the surrounding part of the issue is that the groundwater is so high in all of Southwest Michigan. We all know about the erosion that's happening on Lake Michigan because it's so high. Again, you know, climate change is an issue, and there just are not resources put into place to start addressing these things. You know, as a county commissioner, I try to look for ways to help, you know, my constituents. You know, what can we do? They are problem solving themselves, you know, and finding ways to address their situation, but there just aren't mechanisms or resources in place. Now, I will, the governor, give her all credit. She did propose $40 million in her budget for issues such as these, to be able to respond to the impacts of climate change, as well as she started something called Catalyst Communities, where individual local governments can have some resources to start to put plans in place to address the impacts of climate change and other climate emergencies. So I think it's just continuing to move forward with that, as well as all the other things that we mentioned.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both very much. The next issue we wanted to talk about is, you know, you both, you know, talked about so many critical issues just there. And, you know, another one that's, I know, has gotten a lot more attention in recent years is right now in Michigan, we have over 24,000 contaminated sites across the state. And that number is only growing, with corporate polluters leaving the cost of cleanup to the taxpayers. Our cleanup programs right now do not have the funding to clean up all of these. They don't even really have the funding to clean up a significant portion within one budget year. And statute of limitations laws in Michigan only allows us to hold polluters accountable if they can be convicted in court, that is for 6 years past the instance of contamination, not past even the discovery of contamination, where many sites are discovered well past that. And so what are some steps that you can think of that the legislature should consider to confront problems around contaminated sites and waterways in Michigan? And specifically, what are some of the answers that you think we should look at? And also, would you support getting rid of the statute of limitations for environmental contamination? And for this one, we'll start with you, Representative-Elect Morse.
Okay, great. So of course, the number one thing we need to do is reinstitute polluter pay. Now, I've kind of looked into this issue and trying to understand why it was done away with, was it in the 90s? And I understand that part of the issue was that local governments were often held liable if they, for example, bought the land after the company left, and that was part of the issue. But what we need to do is create a law that actually holds those organizations accountable that are actually doing the polluting. So, maybe we do need to change from what it was before, but we need to have something in place, because otherwise companies can just do what they want. If there's nothing holding them back, nothing holding them accountable, then, are they going to be honest and do the right thing? I don't know. The other part of that is, oh geez, I lost my train of thought. What was the other part of the question, Sean? Remind me.
The statute of limitations.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. So sorry. Statute of limitations. Yes. I mean, 6 years is from the time of the pollution is really not appropriate, because, it can take decades and decades. And I understand companies don't want to be potentially held liable for decades. But the problem is, if we don't put some teeth into some legislation and give, the communities time, to find, even to discover what could be going wrong. I mean, it's just an extreme disservice to the people that live in our state.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks very much for that explanation. I think it's critical to talk about as well the issue there with cities in the initial polluter pay law, and the fact that they were being held liable by sort of one of the issues with that initial law, which has luckily been fixed. Just so you know, when you do get there, in the version that has been introduced over the last few terms by Representative Robbie and Senator Irwin. And Representative Puri, what are your thoughts?
I think Rep-Elect Morse kind of broke it down really well. I guess just to piggyback off of what she was saying, unfortunately, Michigan has more identified PFAS sites than any other state in the country. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just not a list that we want to be number one on. And the issue here with statute limitations is just that the clock starts when the pollution occurs. And, it's a problem because it just doesn't make any sense. As was mentioned, it could take decades before the pollution is discovered, or could be a while before the substance is even identified as toxic. And so, I think, as we've mentioned here, there's some legislation already in the Senate that would set the timer at a more reasonable time for when a person knows the area is polluted, or there's a legislation package that we were talking about in the House, which I would fully support to just stiffen the criminal and civil penalties for companies that are contaminating our air, water, and pollutants. But overall, with polluter pay, we need to move the burden away from taxpayers and towards making sure that the people doing the contamination are the ones paying for it.
Well, great. Thank you both very much for both of those answers. And, going into my next question, and, holding polluters accountable and why they're able to get away. And we see a lot of environmental rollbacks, or a lot of terrible pieces of legislation being pushed through to really leave them off the hook, is really the influence of special interest in our politics, especially here in the state of Michigan. Not having a vibrant and healthy democracy that is transparent makes it harder to achieve conservation victories and to get good laws passed that, not only protect our environment, our air, water, and land, but also that protect public health and really make the democratic process a lot more easier and accessible to participate in. So right now, Michigan ranks dead last when it comes to transparency and accountability of state government. Michigan's legislature doubled campaign contribution limits, approved unlimited political spending by dark money groups. And during the 2018 lame duck session, we saw countless direct attacks on our democracy and our environment. As a state legislator, will you both, support legislation that increases, voter participation, strengthens the voice of people, and enacts campaign finance reform? And what do you think the legislature should do to ensure fair and representative government in Michigan? And I forgot who went first last time. Was that Rep-Elect Morse that went first last time? We'll have a Rep-Elect Puri go first this time.
All right, cool. Yeah, no, I mean, great question. Listen, look, I strongly support any measure which makes it easier to vote and lifts the voice of Michiganders. And, half jokingly, I'd love to get money out of politics because fundraising as a candidate is not fun. So I'd love to get that taken care of. But, on a more serious note, our state's actually made good headway by making voting easier and more convenient, especially during the pandemic with the early voting, the no excuse absentee voting, the allowing the same day and online registrations. That was all great progress that we made recently. And additionally, our state will be better off when the independent redistricting commission comes out with those new and fair and impartial legislative districts. But we can do more, and I actually have a ton to say about this one, but we should appropriate money that will support language assistance efforts, voter registration efforts, upgrading voting machines and ballot counting to ensure election integrity. We need to streamline voter registration with automatic voter registration and pre-register 16 and 17-year-olds so they don't need to register to vote when they turn 18. Support our township clerks by allowing time and resources to administer elections, and we saw a lot of that play out in this recent election, and just strengthen civics education in schools. I think there's a lot we can do. And then, on the campaign finance reform piece of it, we know that Michigan ranks dead last for transparency. And again, it's another one of those lists that we just don't want to be on the bottom of. And so I strongly support, any legislation that will increase transparency into our political system here. And we need to reverse the policies that were enacted during the 2018 lame duck session that undercut campaign finance laws at the voters' expense. And so again, any measure that would hold candidates and donors, including even my own, more accountable through clearly defined fundraising disclosures, deadlines, and penalties, I'm all in favor of.
Perfect, great. And Rep-Elect Morse.
Well, of course, I agree with, everything Rep-Elect Puri said. A couple things I'll just highlight. Number one, I'm a county commissioner, so everything we do is FOIable, first of all. And so I am more than, I make it transparent. It really does keep you honest. I think it makes you more careful. And it really makes you always remember that we are doing this for the people, and this information belongs to the people. And so I am all for increasing transparency in the legislature. Obviously, all the voting changes that came through were incredible for our state, and whatever makes it easier for people to vote is what we should be doing. And that includes what we all know is that we wouldn't have all this hubbub around the election if we had given our clerks more time to count absentee ballots, because there wouldn't be these big drops, which actually happened in my race. There was a 7,000 vote swing in my race at 4:30 in the morning, but I knew it was coming because I knew those absentees were out. But if we would have given them time, then we wouldn't be here well, maybe we still, but I don't know. That would have made a big difference. Anyway, and I also think Rep-Elect Puri made a really good point about the changes that could come with the redistricting that will happen for 2022. At this point, Michigan is an extremely gerrymandered state, and redistricting will make a lot of districts more competitive, which means that no one, we've had a decade of a legislature that doesn't need to fight for their seats. They just get elected. They every time, and then they have the majority every time. And because it's not fair what they set up in 2010 and 2011. So I'm really excited to see, a little bit nervous because I don't know what my district's going to look like. But at the same time, I'm really hopeful about the change that it can bring to our state overall.
Yeah, thank you very much. Transparency is such a key issue towards building a democracy that really does work for the people. So glad to see that you're both advocates on that front as well. We're going to turn to really, I think, one of the most serious environmental issues going on in Michigan right now, and it's a critical environmental justice issue that is only made worse by the impacts of the COVID pandemic. And that is water shutoffs. So across Michigan, water shutoffs for non-payment have been a major problem and a growing problem, especially in low-income communities and communities of color, not just during the pandemic, but before the pandemic as well. So it's a pretty straightforward question. Do you think that access to safe, clean drinking water is a human right? And what do you think can be done in the legislature to address the problem of water shutoffs for non-payment, both during the ongoing pandemic and looking to after the pandemic, to make sure that we're not depriving people of safe, clean drinking water simply because they can't afford it? And we'll start with you, Representative-Elect Morse.
Okay, so, we need water to survive as humans. So it really is unconscionable. Even more so in the time of a pandemic that people's water is turning off. I understand that it's very challenging because everything is a fight for money, right? Everything is a fight for money, and, our local governments sure as heck can't afford, to pay for everyone's water. So I understand it's a challenging thing to solve. At the same time, it is not something we should be doing. And I believe it's Senator Chang has a bill that is making some movement right now, or it's out there, that would stop the practice, and has so I would certainly be in support of that. But, I guess we'll see if it gets anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be putting the link in the chat here in just a moment. We have an action we'd love for everybody watching tonight to take action and contact your current state House representative and state senator and ask them to support Senate Bill 241, which is Senator Chang's bill, which would do just that, to end water shutoffs for the duration of the pandemic. Representative-Elect Puri, I'd love to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, just again, building off of what Rep-Elect Morse said, absolutely. Like, access to water is a human right. Every individual in Michigan should have the right to safe, clean, and affordable and accessible water for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. And so yet, again, as I mentioned earlier, in a state that is surrounded by fresh water with 1/5 of the world's water supply, it's still not guaranteed for Michiganders here. And so, as we just mentioned, the residents of Detroit and Flint have been especially hard hit with these water shutoffs, and it's always due to just extremely unaffordable water bills. And so amid a global pandemic, access to clean water is essential to protecting public health. And so I would like to add that, when this pandemic started, our governor took action when no one else would. She issued an executive order requiring the reconnection of service that for residents who had their water shut off. And then we all saw what happened with the Michigan Supreme Court ruling taking away that power. And so, the issue of this issue now is in the hands of the state legislator. And so I'm absolutely supportive of Senate Bill 241. And I hope that does have traction to get the support it needs.
Yeah, thanks very much. And, I know I was surprised to learn at first when, years ago when I first started sort of working on this, on water issues, I was very surprised to learn that several major cities in the US, Philadelphia being a prime example, no longer shut off water for non-payment. And they've found that by structuring payments differently and by asking those who can't pay the full amount to pay what they can, the city was actually taking in more revenue on water bills, and they were saving money by not having to set out these crews constantly to turn people's water on and back off. So it is an option for all of us. I'm hoping we'll be able to see some action on that during both of your terms in office here.
Great, thanks, Sean. And again, if you all take a look in the chat, there is a link to an action alert to tell our state legislators to take action on Senate Bill 241 to ensure that people have access to safe, clean drinking water to protect themselves against COVID-19 during this pandemic. Going into the next question this is around environmental justice again, another justice issue in places around the state. An obvious example being the 48217 zip code in Southwest Detroit. Communities, are surrounded by polluting facilities, and with so many sources of air and water pollution concentrated in one place, considering permits to increase air and water pollution individually hasn't been effective in protecting our environment or public health in these communities. And to both of you, what would you support changing in our laws, and would you support in changing the permitting processes to protect these communities? And we'll start with you, Rep-Elect Puri.
Yeah, for starters, we can't have the regulated doing the regulating. And so I think it was in 2017 under the Snyder administration where that administration set up private sector-based panels to oversee most of the decision-making that's being done at the DEQ. And so there's a clear conflict of interest right there. And I think that's just a good first step of a place that we can start with change.
Perfect. And Rep-Elect Morse.
Well, this is actually happening in Kalamazoo as we speak. We have a big company called Graphic Packaging that there's been a lawsuit about the smell that's emitting from the factory. And so, that is a hot topic around here. And I think, I don't know exactly what we can do, but I think part of the issue is that Eagle is severely underfunded. And so they're the ones that have to, do all this enforcement, and they're not where they should be. I mean, with all the things that Eagle has to juggle, I don't think they have the resources they need to really do what they need to do. And I'm not actually sure, I would have to look into the state of law and permitting and see, where can we make changes to, make them stronger. And maybe part of that is bringing in polluter pay. That might, stop some companies or have them rethink, what they're putting out to the atmosphere, because we all know that oftentimes these companies, polluting companies are placed in areas where their people are already disadvantaged, and we need to make sure that their voices are lifted up when they notice a problem.
Thank you all.
Yeah, that's a great point that, polluter pay is such a tremendous disincentive to pollute. When you know that there's a better chance you'll be held accountable for it, more likely to not do so. And so our next question, we had a question in the Q&A here, which goes right into the next question that we had for you. And so you both may have seen recently Director Clark of Eagle issued a decision that Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation was not able to challenge Nestle's permit to pump 400 gallons a minute from the White Spring well. She ruled that they were not able to challenge that through the contested case process at Eagle. So I know that, that issue is going to keep moving forward. Michigan residents, and, we definitely hear it with clean water and our field staff out in districts across the state. One of the things we hear most is how are we going to stop companies like Nestle from taking our water for free, while Michigan residents in, Benton Harbor, Kalamazoo, Flint, Detroit, really in so many places around our state don't have access to that same water. And so, what that really ties into is the public trust doctrine, which is a fundamental principle of law that guarantees public ownership of our water. And that public ownership is entrusted to the state to protect our water resources in perpetuity. So public trust in Michigan is currently reinforced through case law and legal precedent, but continuing to sort of move this through case law has proved really expensive and also ineffective at protecting our water from water takers who want to extract publicly owned groundwater for private profit. As climate change continues to put pressure on fresh water supplies around the world, we want to make sure that the strongest possible legal protections against the extraction of Great Lakes water for export are in place. What do you think that the Michigan legislature should do to increase these protections for our public trust resources to make sure that companies like Nestle are no longer exporting our water for tremendous profits? We'll start with you, Representative-Elect Morse.
Well, for me personally, it's really infuriating that Nestle makes, I don't know, millions, billions of dollars off of our water for almost nothing. It really doesn't make sense to me that more people there isn't a huger public outcry about that. But again, as climate change continues to happen and other states are looking for water resources, they're going to be looking to us. So I really think that we should enact some sort of public trust regarding our water, some legislation that does protect the water for the people of the state of Michigan. That's not to say that, you know, we can't one day help out other states, like if we so decide, but I think at this point we should, especially when we have something as, you know, in my view, egregious as what's happening with Nestle, you know, we really should be protecting the water for the citizens of this state.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, it's amazing to sort of think about that, you know, when it comes to water resources, or take, for example, California, where they dammed up 6 major rivers over the course of the last 150 years, and the groundwater table in the Central Valley, which produces more agriculture than anywhere else in the country, has dropped to the point where farmers are drilling down 1,500 feet and not hitting the aquifer. It's kind of scary to think that then that sort of massive water extraction could be looking to Michigan, and we don't have the legal protections in place to deal with it. So Representative-Elect Puri, what are your thoughts on public trust and how we might strengthen that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think both Representative-Elect Morse and yourself were just spot on. And look, Michigan's water is a priceless resource, and it should remain in our Great Lakes watershed safely and without risk for our future generations. And so as a member of the Michigan Legislature, I'm going to remain committed to protecting our invaluable natural resources here. And so there is some proposed legislation out there, I think, to close the water bottling loophole and to eliminate the ambiguity of groundwater as a public trust resource. And you know, we just need to prioritize that effort and not hold our future at risk.
Well, great. Thank you both. And, you know, it is essential that we are, you know, protecting our water resources, our land, our air, and taking care of, you know, the precious environment and planet that we all live on. And, you know, I think the public trust doctrine is very fundamental to protecting, you know, all of those things, you know, and really entrusting our state to protect those very resources, you know, for the people of Michigan, for all people to enjoy, both now and for future generations to enjoy. And if we don't tackle, you know, this next issue, which connects all other issues, it's all interconnected, and that is climate change. So climate change is the greatest environmental challenge of this century and is the Sierra Club's #1 priority. Science demands that we take bold action to reduce carbon pollution. And, you know, for the health of the planet, the public, and the economy, Michigan must continue to transition to a 100% clean energy future, and do so in ways that advance economic, racial, and gender justice, and create family-sustaining jobs through a just transition. We must consistently choose clean energy over dirty fuels of the past. And so to both of you, what sort of steps should the legislature be considering and taking to address the climate crisis in a real and meaningful way as we move towards the future? And we'll start with you, Rep-Elect Puri.
I think this is one of the most important questions of tonight. And, I think we need to be electing more candidates like Rep-elect Morse and myself who share these values. And then I think the first step is unfortunately just understanding and all agreeing that this is a very serious problem and that Michigan needs to become a national leader and a role model in terms of other states and how to deal with this issue. But, that's why I love having conversations with the Sierra Club and Clean Water Action, because my values are completely aligned. We need to move to completely renewable energy. And that's the best and really only path forward for our state. On the economic front, solar jobs are growing at 17 times more faster than the overall job market. Wind industry is bringing in millions of dollars to rural communities and boosting the tax revenues, all across the state and country. And I'm coming from the automotive industry, and I want to see us completely overhaul our fleet and move to more battery and hybrid vehicles to prepare for the future. And so, the Governor Whitmer recently announced the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan to go carbon neutral by 2050. And that's for starters. The legislator needs to work with the governor and not against her, and helping Michigan to reach those targets. And there's obviously many paths to make sure we get there, but it has to be imperative that we're all working towards those goals.
Perfect. And Rep-elect Morse.
Well, of course, I agree with all of that. And again, if we are investing in our infrastructure, we are putting people to work in good jobs. And if there is an emphasis on that infrastructure, on green energy and doing what we can to increase that, then we're all moving in the right direction. I like to bring up, it was a comic from the New Yorker or something, and it was the sun, and he's laughing at the humans. And it's like, I gave you guys my energy all this time and you wasted it, And so it's just, when there's resources that we can use and we can put people to work, putting those structures into place, then absolutely, we should be doing it. And I'm also, I'm hopeful that more companies will start moving in that direction. We already had Ford Motor Company, putting an emphasis on electric vehicles. GM now has said that they will, move forward with President Biden's recommendations. So versus the Trump administration. So the more that we can see also businesses taking the lead and saying, you know what, we understand that climate change is a problem and we're going to do our part, the better off we're going to be. So again, we're always fighting for resources, but whatever, resources, grants, things like that we can put into place that businesses can use also to increase their energy efficiency, use solar panels, whatever it is we can do to further encourage businesses to come on board, the better off we'll be.
Absolutely. And I, couldn't agree more. And, it was a great point that both of you made, about the jobs and the economic output that can be created, through this transition, and, through also a just transition. And, from the Sierra Club's point of view, is ensuring that we're not leaving anybody behind here in this transition as well. Communities that, where there are a lot of fossil fuel jobs, making sure we are investing in those communities and preparing them and giving them the resources they need for the new economy of the future, so we can transition in a just way that creates, good union, good paying jobs, not only in Michigan, but across the country as well, and do it in a sustainable fashion. So thank you both very much for those thoughtful responses.
Yeah, and I think, thank you very much. We're going to go to one of the questions we've received in the Q&A here, which, so, I mean, you've both, thank you again. You've come on tonight with such wonderful answers to a lot of the problems of our time. And we know that, the last question alone with climate change, if we were to really address climate change the way we ought to, we could create more jobs than we'd know what to do with for a very long period of time. It could be the greatest industrial boom since at least the 1930s. One of the issues that we run into, unfortunately, more than anything else, is issues of everything becoming a partisan issue in Lansing. So, you're both coming in with such great ideas. Do either of you have any ideas about how best to bridge the divide that exists with Republican legislators on these issues, who, obviously live on the same planet as us for the most part, and they rely on the Great Lakes just as much as we do. So how do you think we might be able to start to bridge that gap a little better? Rep-Elect Morse.
Well, number one, I'll say Rep-Elect Puri and I were both on a Zoom call with the governor and all the freshman legislators that are coming in. And many of the Republicans said they're tired of the discord and they really want to work in a bipartisan way. And I hope that's true. I mean, I also think that given 2022, we're going to be redistricted. Many of them might not be in such surefire districts, so hopefully they will see that it's important to do that bipartisan work so that we are putting things up to the governor that she can sign. I think really it's about establishing those relationships and coming from a place of trust. And, I hope to, make some friendships with some of my colleagues across the aisle and move forward on legislation that we can agree on. It is challenging because the environment has been made into this very partisan issue. But the problem is everyone needs to get there at some point, whether you like it or not, because these are things that we are continuing to face. And if we don't do something, the consequences are going to impact everybody in a very negative way. So I guess communication and trying to get some relationships going is my number one.
Excellent, thank you. And yeah, it's because it's funny because we really don't see as much partisanship on the environment when we're talking to regular folks out in communities. Republicans care about these issues very much as well. So hopefully it's a gap we can start to work on. And Representative-Elect Puri.
Again, I think Rep-Elect Morse was spot on there. Listen, I'm still naive and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I want to go in and really do want to work across the aisle. I think, I agree with a large part of what she said. I think what I would add to that is, a lot of the communication and talking points need to be more value-based. Obviously things are hyper-partisan. We've talked about the redistricting and opening up to independently drawn districts is going to remove some of that partisanship to make these races more competitive. But if we stick to values, I mean, anyone wants safe drinking water for their kids. Anyone wants their child to have education, access to quality education, regardless of what zip code they live in. And so I think if we can speak just to more values, that there might be some level of to salvage some bipartisan issues and an agreement, even in this like hostile and hyper divided legislature.
Excellent. Well, I sure hope you're both right and we can start getting some more things done in this next term here. And so we had a question come in from Facebook as well, which is what can be done about Michigan's awful recycling rate, especially when the cost for communities is so high with less profit? So Representative Puri, would you like to start on that one?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, it's an issue I need to learn more about. I know it's a systemic issue that I think we're dealing across the country. I know a large part of it has to do with just subsidies and the way that China is now rejecting a lot of our recycling. So I think that there's efforts that can obviously start at the local level, just to incentivize our recycling practices to be better. And so I would obviously support, again, anything that would be on that side of things. And I think it's something that we obviously need to pay more attention to.
Great, thank you. And Representative-Elect Morse.
Well, I would say there have been a couple of not so great bottling bills that have been put forth. So definitely fighting those off, number one. Personally, I think the system in Michigan has been great and in terms of recycling pop cans, but I think we should extend it, right? Like the water bottles that Nestle is bottling are just, terrible for our environment. And again, we need to give people, you often just have to incentivize people to do the right thing, I guess. And so I personally would be in favor of requiring, a deposit on water bottles and whatever is not already, required to have that.
Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense, because when you go to our bottle deposit law, the return rate is always over 80%, usually closer to 90, if not over that. So anything we can do to extend that into water bottle and everything, which I know has been a big priority for Clean Water Action for several years, would be helpful there. Cool. So so I think that's about all the questions we have time for this evening. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all the work that you put in to get elected. I just ask if either of you have sort of some final thoughts to share. And we'll start with you, Rep-Elect Morse.
Well, again, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. I'm certainly hoping, and we might be a little bit Pollyannish, not having gotten there yet, but I would love to see some movement on some of these things at the legislature, some bipartisan movement. We're doing it in criminal justice, and I'm really hoping we can do some on the environment as well. I'm really grateful to be able to go and represent the people of District 61 and do my very best to, represent the issues that are important to them. And like I said, we talked about clean drinking water and our environment from the get-go, and that's important to people. So I look forward to doing what I can to try to move forward on those issues.
Thanks very much. And Representative-Elect Puri.
In closing here, I just again want to reiterate my just thankfulness for Clean Water Action, the Sierra Club, for setting this up, and again for just being such strong voices on these issues every cycle and every day. And congratulations again to Rep-Elect Morse on flipping that district. In passing, as I mentioned, I have 2 small kids, and what I tell people is I need to go to bed every night being able to look them in the eye and tell them that I'm fighting for their future. I mean, we live in the most beautiful state in the country, and a lot of that is in question and at risk. And so if we don't start taking preventative measures, again, a lot of that's at risk. And so I look to be a strong voice for these issues in the legislature, and I hope to be working very closely with everyone here.
Great. Thank you both very much. And thanks to everybody who attended tonight, either on our Facebook Live or here in the Zoom. We're going to be having another session of our On Tap Town Hall series coming up next Thursday night with Representative-Elect Felicia Braybeck. And we're also going to be having somebody else we're still working to confirm. So I hope everybody can join us for that as well. And thank you all very much. Everybody have a great evening.